Hello there, my name is Sharon Weiss-Greenberg, and I am here today to talk about um, the ritual of the Sotah. And as anyone who, if you've read what the ritual is, many people find it to be quite disturbing. How could the Torah call for this? Why does it happen? Why is it in the Torah? Why is there a whole volume of the Gemara that is dedicated to this topic? So first what I'd like to do is fill you in if you don't know who the Sotah is and what the biblical sources of the Sotah, and then I'd like to explore various areas where the story of the Sotah is brought into the narrative in terms of halachic literature and development, and then try to think about how this relates to us today. And it's worth noting that in general, the Sotah ritual the claims are that it never actually happened. Historically never happened, but we have the narrative of what would happen in this week's Parshat Naso. I'm turning to Bamidbar, Parak Hey, the 5th chapter, Pasuk Yud Daled, the 14th verse. Va'avar alav ruach kina, v'kinei et ishto, v'hi nitma'a. Oh, avar alav ruach kina v'kinei et ishto v'hi lo nitma'a. So there's a situation where you have a husband and jealousy comes upon him in regard to his wife. Perhaps that she's become tamei, basically that she's committed adultery, or the situation happens where a man becomes jealous of his wife and she has not engaged in any sort of adultery. And what's interesting about this is that I think the language of jealousy that there's no nuance here, that it's really a problem that a husband is jealous that someone could want his wife. So what ends up happening, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but there's this public ceremony where the woman is taken into sort of this very, very public setting, and there's a ritual, and part of the ritual is that her hair is uncovered and she's shamed physically in a very public manner, and this potion or this water, bitter waters, whatever we want to call it, is concocted by the Kohen and by the priest and is given to the woman, and she drinks the potion, and if she is guilty of adultery, her stomach swells and she passes away. She dies, and it's capital punishment. And the other possibility is that she's not guilty and she drinks the water and she's fine. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and say, well, a woman commits adultery, and that's one of the top 3 things that you're not supposed to do no matter what, then this makes sense. It's capital punishment. She gets what's coming to her. What's fascinating to me is this situation where it's very possible that she's not guilty, and there's no trial, there's no Beit Din, there's no Jewish court like we have in general. But what happens here is that it's trial by God, which is sort of fascinating. And there are a few lessons that we learn. There are few applications that we have from the Sotah. One thing that's interesting is when it comes to women learning Torah, and we see the Mishnah in Sotah 20a, we learn from Ben Azai that if she has independent merit, she has some sort of schar, that it postpones the punishment, meaning that and in the context of this, it's if she's learned Torah, or then the merit of her having learned Torah allows her to not have that public humiliation of dying in public, which is fascinating. So basically, one of our sources that supports women learning at large is that of the Sotah, which is not the most prominent citizen of society. So that's one area where we see Sotah. Another area is when it comes to hair covering in Jewish ritual. We see the Sifrei comments that and he shall uncover the head of the woman. Another interpretation, this teaches us regarding Jewish women that they cover their hair. And although there is no proof to this, there is an indication to this, as it says, and Tamar placed a covering on her head. And if you ever learn the halachot of hair covering, we start with the Sotah. And it seems, that it was normative in society for women to cover her hair during this point in time. And that's why it was such a public humiliation. One other fascinating anecdote when it comes to the story of Hannah, who was unable to have children. She was barren. According to Rabbi Elazar, according to Midrash, we see that Hannah invoked the Sotah because on the one hand, you passed away, you were killed, essentially, if you committed adultery. But if you did not commit adultery, story goes that you drink this potion, if you were barren, if you were dealing with infertility, that all of a sudden you would have a child. And Hannah threatens, says, God, master of the universe, if you take note of my suffering and grant me a child, great. But if not, then you will see. I will go and seclude myself with another man in front of my husband Elkanah. And when I seclude myself, they will give to me to drink the water of the Sotah. And you will not belie your Torah, for it is stated with regard to an innocent woman who drinks the Sotah waters, then she shall be proven innocent, and she shall bear seed. And we see this in Brachot 31b, which is this fascinating reality that we see that Hannah, who's praised for how she prays quietly, and we mimic and emulate the way that she prayed to God. But it seems like she threatened God here with the story of the Sotah. So we see a number of ways that the Sotah and the position of the Sotah is utilized for various mitzvot and even for Hannah to have children. And that's the big question. Why is it okay for a woman to have to go through this very public process if she's not guilty, if she didn't commit adultery? And there's harsh critique about the ritual of the Sotah at large. But in the age of Me Too, I'd like to think about it a bit differently. And the most commentaries would sort of say that she put herself in a situation where she allowed herself to be suspected of adultery, and that she shouldn't have done that. On the one hand, many people say that that's so judgmental, and ultimately the reason why the ritual of the Sotah doesn't happen is because the man has to be completely innocent, and we see that that is not the case as time goes on. But I'd like to think about the notion, regardless of the sex of the person, that we do not want to be in a situation where someone could be accused of doing wrong. And no one seems to have a problem with that when it comes to Sotah. And now what's interesting in the age of Me Too is that I've spoken to many men who are scared, and they're trying to figure out how to protect themselves, but also continue to empower women and promote women in the workplace and this and that. And what I would like to propose is that we learn from the lesson of the Sotah that there is merit to the idea of not creating a situation that looks bad, that looks suspectful. And the same way we allow for this within our narrative, within the Gemara, what would it look like to think about the society at large? What it would look like to make sure that in the workplace that both men and women are not putting other people and both men and women do not put other men and women in situations that could look bad or be misinterpreted, and vice versa. Something I've been thinking about for a while, and I'm hoping that some of you could share your insights in the comments below, and perhaps at your Shabbat table and then post after. Let's think about a time where we have this notion of creating a siyag the Torah, a fence around the Torah. Let's think about putting a fence around our people, and how we can make sure that we're all protected in Jewish communal workplaces, in synagogues, in schools, and camps. What would that look like? And perhaps it's time to take on that lesson of the Sotah, as difficult as that episode of the Sotah is. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom.